The phone rang on an ordinary morning, and by the time the call ended, nothing in this house was the same. A single mistake, a buried secret, and a truth someone died trying to uncover. What if the person you trusted most wasn't protecting you, but protecting a lie? The call came on a quiet morning in early spring. I was watering the plants by the kitchen window when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something about it made my heart race. Mrs. Lane, a woman's voice asked. This is from the base. We just wanted to confirm that Sergeant Michael Lane's personal effects have been received by his family. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world around me went still, like the air had forgotten how to move. What do you mean personal effects? I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause. Then she said softly, I'm sorry, Mom. You should have already been notified. The rest of her words blurred into noise. I stood there clutching the counter. The phone pressed to my ear, as if holding it tighter could change what she said. Dot, dot. By the time Richard arrived, I was sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by silence. He didn't ask questions. He just knelt beside me and wrapped his arms around me the way a father might comfort his daughter. That was the moment everything began to change. For days, people came and went. Neighbors, friends, officers, they said all the right things. He was brave. He served with honor. He loved you more than anything. But none of those words filled the space Michael left behind. Dot. Richard stayed. He made coffee every morning, fixed things that didn't need fixing, and sat with me through long nights when I couldn't close my eyes. Sometimes he said nothing at all, and somehow that helped the most. A week later, a small wooden box arrived from the base. Inside were Michael's wedding ring, his watch, and a folded letter sealed in an envelope. My name was written on it in his handwriting. Dot. My hands shook as I opened it. Anna, it began. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. There's something I never told you. I asked Dad to look after you, not just because I trust him, but because he knows the truth about me and about what I did. I stopped reading. My eyes darted to Richard, who stood at the doorway watching quietly. What does this mean? I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Faw. He took the letter gently from my hand and sat across from me. His expression was unreadable. There's more, he said softly. Finish it? I hesitated, then kept reading. Before we married, there was something from my past that I never explained. If it ever comes to light, I need you to forgive me. Dad will understand. He's part of it, too. The letter ended there, unfinished. No signature, no explanation, just a few words that left more questions than comfort. I looked at Richard. Part of what? What did he mean? He rubbed his temples, the lines on his face deepening. I thought I'd never have to talk about that again, he said quietly. About what? I pressed, my voice breaking. He met my eyes, and for the first time since Michael's death, I saw something that scared me. Guilt. Your husband wasn't just deployed, he said. He was searching for something that belonged to this family, and now you deserve to know what that was. His voice barely above a whisper. He found out the truth about his mother's death, and he wasn't supposed to. The words struck me harder than I expected. Michael's mother had died when he was a teenager. An accident, or so I'd always been told. What do you mean he wasn't supposed to? I asked, my heart pounding. Dot. Richard stood, his shoulders tense. Because it wasn't an accident, Anna, and Michael was closer to the truth than anyone realized. I stared at him, unable to speak. The man I had trusted, the man my husband had trusted, looked suddenly like a stranger standing in my kitchen. He stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. I promised Michael I'd keep you safe. But before I can do that, you need to know what really happened in this family. My breath caught. Richard, what did you do? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the door and said quietly, It's not what I did. It's what Michael discovered before he left. Then he left me standing there, the letter trembling in my hands and the echo of his words filling the silence. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the petals from the garden Michael planted before he left. They swirled against the window like a storm beginning to rise, one that had been waiting years to break. The night after Richard's words, I couldn't sleep. The house felt alive with old ghosts. Every creak of the floor and rustle of the curtains carried memories I hadn't asked for. I tried to quiet my thoughts, but Michael's letter echoed over and over in my mind. He knows the truth about me. He's part of it, too. Dot. By sunrise, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of untouched coffee when Richard stepped outside. He looked like he hadn't slept either. You said Michael discovered something about his mother, I said quietly. Tell me what that means. He stared at the horizon for a long time before speaking. To understand that, you need to know how he and I drifted apart before he met you. The sound of his voice pulled me into the past. I remembered the first time I met Michael. It was at a volunteer clinic downtown. I was helping set up tables for a food drive when a man walked in wearing a worn leather jacket, holding 2 boxes of supplies. His smile was the kind that made you forget what you were doing. Need a hand? He asked. You already brought 2, I teased. He laughed. Well, that deep, easy laugh that made everyone nearby turn to look. That's how it started. Small talk, shared coffee, and long days spent helping strangers. I didn't know then that he had joined the program to keep his mind off his mother's passing. He rarely talked about it except once. She was kind, he said one evening while packing up, but she carried too many secrets. Sometimes I think my father loved her too much to see who she really was. That was the first time I saw the shadow behind his smile. When we fell in love, it wasn't planned. It was quiet and steady, like breathing. He took me to his family's lake house one summer. Richard met me there. Polite, but distant. I could tell he was protective, not rude, just careful. You're all he talks about, Richard said one evening as we sat by the fire. I just hope you understand the life you're walking into. My son doesn't know how to let things go. At the time, I thought he meant Michael's stubbornness. I didn't know he was talking about something deeper. Our wedding was simple. Small chapel, a handful of friends, and Richard sitting alone in the front pew, his expression unreadable. Michael squeezed my hand at the altar and whispered, He'll come around. He always does, but he never really did. Months into our marriage, Michael became quieter. There were nights he stayed up late, staring at files spread across the kitchen table. Military reports, old photos, names of people I didn't recognize. What are you looking for? I asked one night. He hesitated. The truth. About what? He looked up, eyes sharp. About my mother. I found letters she wrote before she died. They don't match what Dad told me. I froze. What did he tell you? That it was an accident. But these letters say she was planning to leave him. The air in the room changed. Michael wasn't angry, just hurt. I wanted to ask more, but he folded the letters and locked them away. From that day on, something stood between us, something invisible but heavy. When he was deployed, our calls became shorter. His messages grew distant. He'd say, I love you, but his voice sounded like he was somewhere else entirely. Then one day he stopped answering altogether. I assumed it was the mission. Now, sitting across from Richard, I realized it was something else and else. He was searching for proof, Richard said quietly. He thought I had something to do with his mother's death. I felt a chill run through me. Did you? No, Richard said firmly, but I did hide the truth. She wasn't planning to leave me. She was protecting someone she shouldn't have. He walked back into the house and returned with an old photo album. He opened it to a page near the back. There was a picture of a young woman, Michael's mother, holding a baby. Her smile was soft, her eyes bright, but it wasn't Michael in her arms. The baby's hair was lighter, the features different. Who is that? I asked Dot. Richard looked at the picture for a long moment. That's the secret Michael discovered before he left. That child isn't him. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. Michael found records that said he was adopted, that his mother had another child before him. A child she never told me about. She kept it hidden all her life. I tried to make sense of it. So Michael thought that baby might still be alive. Yes, Richard said, and he went looking for the truth. I stared at the photo. The colors faded, but the mystery clear. For years, I had loved a man who carried a secret he didn't even understand. A secret that began before he was born. Dot. As I turned the page, something slipped from the album. An old folded note yellowed with time. I picked it up carefully. On the front, written in familiar handwriting, were the words for Anna. When the time comes. I looked at Richard. His face went pale. That wasn't there before, he said softly. The morning light spilled across the table, touching the edge of the note like it had been waiting for years to be opened. And in that instant, I knew Michael's story wasn't over. It was just beginning again through me. The letter sat on the kitchen table for hours before I had the courage to open it. The morning sun had climbed high, pouring light through the window, but it did nothing to ease the weight in my chest. Richard hadn't spoken since he found it in the album. He stood by the sink, hands gripping the counter, his eyes distant. I broke the seal and unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was Michael's, a little uneven, written in blue ink. If you found this, it means the truth reached you in ways I never wanted. The child in that photo isn't me, but she's closer to you than you think. Dad doesn't know everything. Some truths skip a generation. Find her, Anna. She's the key. The note ended there. No date, no place, just a few cryptic words that shifted everything I thought I knew. I looked up. He said, she's closer to me than I think. What does that mean? Richard shook his head slowly. I don't know. He never told me about this letter, I swear. I studied him carefully. His voice trembled, and for the first time I saw fear. Not of the truth itself, but of what it might take from him. Closer to me, I repeated under my breath. And then it hit me. Years ago, before Michael and I married, I had been working at a small local hospital. There was a young nurse there named Emily, who looked strikingly like Michael's mother in old photos. She had the same hazel eyes, the same quiet smile. We lost touch when she moved to another city. Could that be who he meant? I think I know who she might be, I whispered. Richard turned sharply. Who? A woman Michael met once through me. Emily. She worked at the clinic where we volunteered. He said she reminded him of his mother. Richard's eyes darkened. And where is she now? I shook my head. I don't know. I haven't seen her in years. Without another word, he walked out of the room. A few minutes later, I heard the car engine start. He was gone before I could stop him. That night, I sat by the window, replaying every memory of Michael I could hold on to. His laugh, his touch, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. I didn't realize I had drifted into sleep until headlights swept across the living room wall. Dot. The door opened. Richard walked in, his face pale, his expression unreadable. I found her, he said quietly. Dot. My heart jumped. Emily, he nodded. She's living 2 towns over. She works at a small care home. But Anna, she already knows who you are. I stared at him, stunned. What do you mean? She told me Michael visited her before he left for deployment, Richard said. He asked her for a DNA test. She said yes. I felt the world tilt slightly. So she knew she was related to him. She didn't at first, he said. But when the results came back, she realized what Michael had suspected all along. She's his sister. The words hung in the air, quiet but heavy. So that's what he meant, I said softly. That's what he was searching for. Richard nodded. He wanted to tell you, but he didn't want to drag you into something painful. I sank into the nearest chair, and now she knows about me. Yes, Richard said, and she asked to see you. The next morning I drove with him to the care home. The building stood at the edge of town, surrounded by tall pines that swayed gently in the breeze. When I walked in, a woman turned from the reception desk, and for a moment it felt like I was looking at Michael's mother all over again. Anna, she said softly. I'm Emily. Her voice was kind, calm. I felt my throat tighten as I nodded. Michael wrote about you. Tears filled her eyes. He told me you were the only person he ever truly trusted. We sat down in a small garden behind the building. The air was cool, and the scent of rain lingered. Emily handed me a small brown envelope. He gave me this the day before he left. He said if anything happened, I should give it to you. My hands shook as I took it. Inside was a single photo. Michael standing beside Emily, smiling. On the back, written in his handwriting, were the words, "Now she's safe." I looked up, confused. What does this mean? Emily swallowed hard. He told me someone was after the truth about our family. He said if he couldn't stop them, you and his father would have to. Before I could speak, Richard stepped forward. Did he say who? Emily hesitated. He only said it was someone inside the family, someone who didn't want the past uncovered. The garden went quiet. A single gust of wind rustled through the trees, and the 3 of us sat frozen in that uneasy silence. I turned to Richard. His face had gone white. His hand trembled as he reached for the letter, but he stopped halfway, staring into the distance like he just remembered something too painful to speak. Richard? I asked softly. He looked at me then, his eyes filled with something between fear and sorrow. "I think I know who he meant," he whispered. "But if I'm right, it changes everything we thought we knew about Michael's mother." My heart pounded. "Who?" He took a long breath. "It wasn't me he blamed. It was my brother." The air went still. The sound of birds faded. And in that quiet, I felt the story we thought had ended years ago beginning to unfold all over again. Richard didn't speak for a long time after his confession. The garden around us felt frozen in place, like even the air was listening. Emily sat still beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could hear her breathing, slow, careful, afraid. Finally, I found my voice. "Your brother. You mean Michael, Uncle?" Richard nodded. "His name is Thomas. We grew up here. He and Michael's mother were close once. Too close, maybe. That's where everything began." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. I looked at Emily, but she already knew. Her eyes told me she'd heard this before, maybe from Michael himself. Richard lowered his gaze. "Years ago, before Michael was born, Thomas worked on the docks. He had trouble keeping steady work. Your mother-in-law helped him, gave him money, kept his secrets. I didn't think much of it until she started lying about where she went." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "When she found out she was pregnant, she told me it was mine. I believed her. But months later, I found a letter. It was from Thomas. He wrote that he was leaving town and that he couldn't live with the shame of what they'd done." Emily inhaled sharply. "You're saying my mother and your brother?" Richard nodded slowly. "I confronted her that night. She didn't deny it. She just said she made a mistake and wanted to protect us both. I left the house. When I came back the next morning, she was gone. They said it was an accident, but I always knew it wasn't. The silence that followed felt endless. I could see the pain etched into his face. Years of holding a truth too heavy for one person." Emily looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "Then who am I, really?" Richard turned to her gently. "You're her daughter. That's all that matters." "That means Michael and I," she whispered. "We're not brother and sister by blood." "We're step-siblings," I said softly. "Different fathers." It was strange how relief and sorrow could exist in the same breath. Emily wiped her eyes, but I could see she was trembling. "He knew, didn't he? That's why he came to me. He wanted to prove you innocent." Richard nodded. "He wanted to clear my name. He wanted to end the silence, but he didn't get the chance." I looked at him sharply. "You said he went searching for something. Was he looking for Thomas?" Richard's voice grew quieter. "Yes. He tracked him down a few months before his last mission. Thomas had been living in a small town in Arizona under a different name. Michael told me he wanted to confront him face to face, to make peace with the past." Full. And did he?" Richard looked away. "He met him once. After that, Thomas disappeared again." The weight of it all pressed down on me. Everything Michael had carried, every question he'd kept from me, all of it led back to this, a family secret buried under decades of silence. Emily stood slowly. "Then we have to find him. If Thomas is still alive, he knows the rest of the story." I looked at Richard. His shoulders sagged as if he'd aged 10 years in a minute. "You really think he's still out there?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If Michael found him once, we can too." We drove back in silence. The sky had turned gray, heavy with the promise of rain. I watched the road unwind ahead, the trees bending gently in the wind. Every mile felt like moving through layers of memory, one truth peeling after another. When we reached the house, Richard stopped the car but didn't get out. His hands stayed on the wheel. "Anna," he said quietly, "there's something else you need to know before we go further." I turned to him, my pulse quickening. "What is it?" He looked at me, his voice low and steady. "Wasn't supposed to be on that mission. He took someone else's place." My breath caught. Why would he do that? "Because he got a message from Thomas the night before," Richard said. "Thomas told him he had proof about their mother's death, but he said he would only talk if Michael met him overseas. He, in a chill, went without telling his unit why." I felt the world tilt again. "Are you saying Thomas set him up?" "I don't know," Richard whispered. "But Michael believed him, and now all we have left are pieces of what he tried to uncover." The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance. "And maybe it's time we both stopped punishing ourselves." Outside, the rain eased, sunlight breaking through the clouds. The house that had once felt like a prison began to breathe again. They stood in the golden light, the air heavy with forgiveness. Later that evening, Emily placed the letters in a wooden box and tied it with a faded blue ribbon. She set it on the windowsill where the light could touch it every morning. "For the years we lost," she said, Dot. Placed his hand over hers, "and for the years we still have." They sat together as the sky turned to dusk, their silence no longer painful but full of understanding. Weeks passed. The house became warmer, filled with laughter that had once been forgotten. Yet one evening, while cleaning the study, Emily found something hidden beneath the floorboard. One last unopened letter, different from the rest. Dot, it wasn't from Michael. It was from his father. With a shaking hand, she opened it. Inside were just a few lines. "If you're reading this, it means I failed to control what love can survive. He is my son, but he was always your match. I tried to end it. I see now I only delayed what was meant to be." Emily set the letter down, her heart quiet but full. The truth had finally come full circle. That night, as Michael sat beside her by the fire, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "He tried to break us," she said softly. "But maybe all he did was make our love stronger." Michael nodded, wrapping his arm around her. "We were meant to find our way back." Outside, the rain began again, gentle, forgiving. Emily closed her eyes, whispering to herself. Some promises survived the storm, and this time it felt like the ending they both deserved. Love, buried in silence, had found its voice again. Not through the words they lost, but through the peace they finally kept.